we are going to have a very important panel that is the future of education challenges. So many things have happened with education. I was teaching online. My experience is better right now because I can record classes. They are pre-recorded for those people who cannot attend synchronously. And then I can show them video and material directly from my e-learning class and from my online class. And I believe that this has been a more enriching experience. I don't know if universities are thinking alike when they get back to classes, the in-person classes or face-to-face. So they should consider these advantages and take them under consideration to address the challenges of future education. We have Matías Centeno moderating the panel that works in the Agribusiness National Institute of Argentina. That is a very important institution because the agribusiness sector is very important. But he's in Seattle because he has a Fulbright scholarship. And Matías, what time is it there in Seattle? Thank you, Olga. Thanks for having me in this panel, a place where I have shared and have been presenting for many years. It's 10:30 here. We're in the future here in Argentina. It was 2:30. So it's 2:30 p.m. So we'll be speaking about the future of education. So you're in the right place. Good. Matías, the floor is all yours to introduce the panelists. I believe that HÉCTOR is going to show a presentation. HÉCTOR is the Latin American Director of Policy Programs and Government Outreach of Facebook. And the other panelists, I believe that I didn't quite get the name of the other panelists. Very interesting space. Thank you, Olga. Many elements and many contributions are going to be made right now. Today, we're going to be speaking on education, the challenges of digital literacy, trends. During the next hour, if you speak of education, those hotspots of education since the pandemic, millions and millions of students and teachers, also media, government, parents, workers from many sectors had to anticipate to e-learning or online education because it was the only way of having access to basic competencies, technical and professional skills in most of the countries across the world. According to the UN for Education, Science and Culture, UNESCO, by May last year, out of 1.2 billion students dropped out of the online classes or discontinued the online classes, and more than 160 million came from Latin America and the Caribbean. As in other areas of social and economic developments, the access was asymmetrical because not all of them were fortunate enough. The CLAC estimate more than 30 million children in Latin America have been excluded or had serious impediments to join digital literacy during the pandemic. So the pandemic needs to expand or must have expanded digital divides in education, and this has been proven by the level of access to technology infrastructure and the digital activities in order to use the applications. And there's an equal distribution also our skills with teachers, especially in the low-income classes or the rural sector, where they have large populations of indigenous people, migrants in Latin America. Now, if we return to the in-person schooling or universities, the challenges and the dilemmas after 2 years of pandemic and what they have proposed for education, they are still dormant. So this afternoon, we're going to have two worldwide experts that are going to offer an outlook and synergy on digital literacy. We have HÉCTOR FAYA with us today, the Director of all LATAM Policy Programs and a Government Outreach from Facebook, and Marta Elena Mariño from the Science and Technology Ministry of Colombia. Okay, HÉCTOR is going to be discussing the challenges ahead in our region and the need for digital literacy and the relevance of the approach that Facebook has embarked upon for addressing digital literacy. Good morning, Matías. Privilege and honor to be here. Acknowledge Olga and the organizers of the South School on Internet Governance that has been for many years making efforts to have a more transparent, productive internet. We know that technology has a lot of potential to leverage opportunities and to level up access to knowledge, know-how, resources, jobs, and business, and has made large contributions in gender-based perspectives and freedoms of expression. If we intend to promote and go beyond any limits, we need to take public education as the cornerstone, and education training or technology training, digital literacy will be the mainstay, especially given the context of the pandemic. The relation between business and government and society has evolved over the last years, more than 20 years ago. Today, no problem that we have as a society can be considered separately. I mean, we are responsible and we participate in the many issues that Latin America has been facing, and Facebook has a responsibility since it's a platform that is connecting 3 billion people across the world. On the part of Facebook, and as I am keen on education and I'm a university teacher, I know that countries have made quantum leaps for developing their political, economic, cultural development. Those are invested heavily on education as a public policy, consistent in time. So, something that is concerning is that the region has widely discussed the technology crisis and digital divide of the pandemic, but we never considered the large crisis in education that is falling apart and breaking the social fabric, since children and young people are the ones that in the future and at present account for the hope to develop Latin America. Let me tell you a story. When I had a chance to work in the Secretariat of Public Education, we have a very good program for continuing education for adults. So I met somebody that learned how to write and read at 82 years old. Learning at that age has made her, even though she was old enough, she could live a new life. So the education provides us with these tools. As a process of removing obstacles, allow us to develop our own potential that is inherent to our rights as human beings, and that is a fundamental right. From the point of view of technology, we can drive this substantially. So our mission is to reach these people and to build communities. And in line with that mission, we are in line with the SDGs of no living or leaving no child behind. helping children and young people. And even before the pandemic, we had a commitment. And that disturbed our lives, and our platforms started to have a relevant role. So WhatsApp was the platform that allowed communication of integration between parents, administrative people, teachers, to continue with this participatory program. Many of the platforms like Facebook groups were used as virtual schoolrooms or classrooms where people could pursue significant education. And what can we tell you about education for SMEs or training for SMEs? The skills enable people to live a life that is productive online, that is full, and that requires digital literacy. Because even though digital literacy is just the ticket to enter the online life, it's not enough to have a very positive and beneficial and productive life. So we need to transit and migrate towards digital literacy and take people to the world digital citizenship model, where they need to understand what are the roles, skills, and obligations to coexist with others. There's an article of Margarita Ensenada where she says that the true place of rebirth is the one where the first time we adopt a smart outlook. First, the books. So when she was born, she said that she is when she came to understand the world that revolves around her. So the best place of founding a society is when we understand each other and we have peaceful coexistence, when disagreement is not a right to humiliate, harass, or extortion others. We are very interested that our platforms be connecting people to have a harmonious life in peace. I have children, and thanks to today's technology, they could follow and pursue classes, online classrooms for a month and a half or a year and a half. Education or online education is fundamental, but these digital tools provide us with opportunities and possibilities that we didn't have before. And nowadays, as future users of these technologies, my children will become accountable citizens and full citizens, cultivated, educated, and Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram, because of their market penetration, will provide them with the possibility of having that digital full life. Because the difference between the virtual and the real world probably is not that much. Latin America has impressive digital divides, very, very challenging ones, and I would like to share with you here. For example, it's one of the most concerning digital divides that we have in Latin America, especially in the industry because of lack of resources, or because we're not aware of, or because of the lack of infrastructure. Sometimes we do have infrastructure and resources, but we don't have the know-how how to leverage this more effectively to benefit from the digital world. So, digital literacy, it is essential, and we, as stakeholders, we pursue opportunities to constantly improve and adapt to a new society that has been evolving very, very swiftly. Social inclusion becomes a need to fight against all forms of discrimination, inequalities, and to promote economic development, as well as protecting democracy and to drive freedom of expression, and make communities highly represented across societies. For us to close the digital divide is a challenge that exceeds the responsibility of governments, business, and people. And that is why I want to raise awareness towards the digital literacy development in Latin America so it becomes a multi-sectorial approach. Sometimes we don't have all the answers, and that's why we are stand at a crossroads, at a crisis. So we need to sit at the negotiation table to find the best answers so we can make a quantum leap with a way that we can put an end to digital divide in Argentina or in Latin America. And we have training programs in Facebook that we have designed with a multi-stake approach. Like, for example, I'm Digital. That has the intent of closing the digital divide and train citizens to participate in this revolution with a critical thinking and with the responsible use of the internet so they could become of transformation agents in their communities. This exists in many countries in the United States. Then we have Misión Escolar, where we use the power of virtual reality to create experiences that are emotional in nature in students, in young people, in public schools, that they're very conflictive so they can learn emotional skills in order to fight cyberbullying, sextortion, harassment, or any other scourges that are unfortunately present in schools. Ella es Historia also is a long-term series of programs that we have to teach women digital skills, very basic ones, and also management, leadership, and financial education. So we can train them during 2019 and they can evolve with a digital transformational outlook and they can use it as a leverage for development in their own communities. Our initiatives in Latin America have affected and impacted many, and we need to work with all the stakeholders and in order to create and raise awareness as much as possible. There's no economic development without an education of quality. We don't have digital citizenry without literacy. There's no democracy without education. And there's no way of closing the digital gap if we don't work together in this endeavor. Matías, thank you very much. And right now over to you, and we can open the discussion for questions if you have one input, comment, or question.
Very interesting, Héctor, the sustainable development goals and this focus on development that we need to build together with all the organizations. Before going to Martha's presentation, I would like to tell you or to mention that because of the pandemic, a lot of boys and girls were forced to drop school because they couldn't take classes online. How can technologies in Facebook help us close the gap, this digital gap? Fortunately, many of the tools that Facebook offers allow marginalized communities to keep connected. I think that the main value is to offer people the capacity of being connected and to build on those communities. During the pandemic, there was I visited different marginalized communities and I asked them how the students connected with some of their teachers and mentors, and they said that they used WhatsApp. In many of the marginalized areas, these apps will not use data, so it's not difficult to keep connected. But knowing that a lot of kids drop out school, we increase or started supporting more and more our programs. All the apps and programs that we have for face-to-face, we wanted to put online. So we launched for all the OAS states a series of technological resources that people can access free of charge and benefit from all the courses and things that we offer with basic abilities in order to be part of the digital world and to continue doing business, learning, or participating in the decision-making of democracy, because that's another thing that we have seen, that democracy and political participation also turned to the virtual world. And Facebook was then a tool that allowed people to participate in that arena, especially for young people. So I would say that connecting people and the programs that we offer with basic skills, offering more and more people connectivity to the digital world through digital skills that give people the possibility of taking advantage of the benefits of Internet. And within this framework that you were mentioning about marginalized communities, how can we think about developing or offering training or other tools to foster capacities development in regions that have educational deficits? You're muted. Thanks, Matías. We have been working with indigenous people in Mexico. We are translating many of our programs to indigenous languages in order to support these communities that generally don't benefit from the online world. We are also working together with communities suffering from abuse, hate, and polarization that many times are expressed online, especially in countries such as Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, that are having a huge amount of population that is displaced, countries such as Venezuela. Today we launched a support program in Brazil also in order to work as advocates of human rights in protected areas in the Amazonia in Brazil. And from Tijuana to Patagonia, including the Caribbean, we are working with social organizations that are working in the streets and that understand perfectly well the problems that we are facing, because if we want to avoid being in Latin America offering a vision that is not connected to the reality that they have. So what we do is work together with the civil societies, civil organizations, the different governments at the national and local level in order to be able to change the life of people in the best way possible. I would say that Facebook is an enabler. We try to enable all the organizations and people and families and parents, and we want to offer diversity, inclusion, and we fight against inequality, and that is paramount for Facebook, especially in a region like Latin America that historically has had so many problems in that sense, not only as regards education, but also all human rights. Let me say, Matías, that we believe that Internet is a basic right, as well as education, which is a basic right that is acknowledged by all the institutions in the world. We believe that Internet is also a right that should be considered as basic, and it should be included in legislation because it's going to enable other rights. So we believe that it's an enabler of fundamental human rights. Thanks for your question. Thank you, Hector. Probably we're going to ask you a few more questions at the end of the panel. We want to invite the fellows and all that are sharing this streaming online to ask questions to the speakers. Now we are going to talk about a public sector point of view. That's why I'm going to introduce Marta Elena Mariño. She works for the Science, Technology and Innovation Ministry in Colombia. She's going to share with us this afternoon, this panel, and she's going to share their experience in this time of the pandemic and how they have developed the different areas in Colombia. Good afternoon. I appreciate your invitation to join you in this School of Internet that is so important for us as a science ministry. I'm going to try to share my screen.
Hemos hecho una reflexión muy a profundidad justamente de todo el escenario en el que se dan preguntas frente a la alfabetización digital, que es una pregunta.
We have reflected upon digital literacy. This is something that is present everywhere. We talked about how we work with different public schools to develop a program that teaches children to research as regards science. And this faces a lot of challenges. We would like to have some ideal conditions for access to information, but actually sometimes that is not the case, and we need to think a little bit and reflect on what communities really need. In that sense, it is important to understand that digital literacy, as Héctor was saying, is going to guarantee access to information, and we know that access to information it's a right of citizens, and it's included within all the framework of rights that was developed by the end of the 20th century. And in that sense, it is important to understand that process of content and access to information, but also how we train the consumers of that information, because that should allow us to bring information to those who needed it and to install capacities in the communities so as to continue moving forward as regards social and community development programs. So it is important for us to understand that those contents, the availability of those contents that was accelerated during the pandemic is very important. There are many things that were not as we thought they were. There are things that had to be improved. So how do we do from this information access process to help them to develop this? Access to information is what is going to give sense to information itself. So we have been paying close attention to how those digital processes connect with the alphabetization or literacy. We have a program focusing on this. This is one of the big challenges that we faced in the research that we do. And this is a concept that UNESCO has been working on since 2011, thinking about how information is access to information is kind of an exercise that will allow us to make decisions, to build on knowledge, to be able to express ourselves, and finally to be listened by others, to listen others, and to have this kind of different development dynamics from an informed position. In these reading and writing exercises that are critical and that there's kind of a gap in schools between the reading process, specifically since these are similar processes. So for us, it's been important to understand this together with research and developing new knowledge and processes. We have databases, a lot of resources, and people specialized in looking those kind of contents. But what we do is start working on those dynamics, and we realized that we need to have those scenarios to review information, to review resources from a critical perspective, to have a cross-sectional learning, to see what we are offering, what we are receiving, and to put it in context. As Héctor was saying, when we talk about platforms like the one he was telling us for kids who have problems at school, it is important to focus on this development, but this should reach schools and should be put in context. And that is what we always do when we do scientific research. And we need to think how we can enhance these processes. We believe that it's important that for kids from an early age to start paying attention and to produce information, to understand what is going on around them and to produce something that is connected to their context. It is something that was paramount in this development in the ministry, that is to put our science in context, to understand our science from the needs that we have. I was giving you an example. Let's suppose that we have a clear intention of offering internet to everyone, but at some point we need to pay attention and offer power to everyone, because there are many communities that have no power. So I cannot guarantee internet if they don't have power, that basic infrastructure that they need. So first we need to focus on that. And this process of rethinking about technology should be something that is done from the access I have to the sources I receive, from the information I receive. This is the way we are moving towards, and there are many different possibilities. And I also need to pay attention to everything that I am receiving, where I'm receiving it from, which is the intent or the goal of what I'm receiving, who sent it. There was some debate as regards free or open software. And for example, I may think that there are some contents that have licenses and we need to invest in these resources. So how can I understand this and make a decision facing that? This means that I expect people to ask questions and to develop knowledge and to learn. We may have access to internet, but we also need to see what is the basic infrastructure and to understand that there are things that we need to solve previous to offering internet to everyone. For example, if we cannot offer power, we need to think how we can do it, how we can bring power to the communities that don't have it. So this is a complete and whole thing that we need to think about. And that's why this digital literacy process has many steps, and it is vital, essential for us. And it has to do with the need of information being at the center of producing knowledge, and that knowledge production has a specific context. So what we have been seeing at the ministry with the different exercises and research that we have been doing, for example, citizenship science, and it is important for communities to understand how they receive this information. The trainings that we offer that HÉCTOR was mentioning, how they put it in context and how they find it meaningful. There may be things that they believe are not meaningful, and it is a dynamic process in which they are going to be the protagonists of this dynamic. And this has to do with how to improve and how to develop relevant things for the communities. And we cannot do that if we don't have a dialogue and if we don't guarantee in that framework the right to receive information, to access information. We need to think that we need to work at a cross-sectional level and to develop the different tools in order to do it. That is one of the focuses in which we are working on. And why?
We're not continue something about creation content or technology if we are not having the necessary skills or capacities in terms of technology or technological development. And if we implement, only if we implement it in the communities, we need to place priority upon the challenges. In research groups, the first thing that we do is we need to consider if we have available a 3D computer or a printer. And this is what the media tells us. And this is what scientists reveal. And sometimes we reconfigure the requirements or review what the community or how the community is going to implement this. So it's going from developing the skills and competencies that are related to innovation and create a set of expertise so they can approach that technology and to understand the goals and where we're going. That exercise that we do in our research centers is something that we do in the Ministry of Science, understanding the reality, for example, content, tools, and we know that we have to promote and leverage in our sector those dynamics that are related to the access to knowledge and the dissemination of knowledge. So here we have some challenge ahead of us that have allowed us to reach the objectives in promoting knowledge in our country. In scientific developments, there's increasingly more schools having access to better quality education. So we're making progress along those needs that provide us with quality education. And this is subject to a mediation and assessment, and how we can integrate this to the communities. And the communities are going to play the role of assessment there, how they're going to implement this. And this is the actual transformation of science. the empowerment of communities, of children, of researchers, and how is going to be implemented in the communities. That change of mindsets facing technology and knowledge, because we have many possibilities in order to understand digital literacy. It's not only approaching with technology to those communities, creating critical spaces. And also, we want stakeholders to help us develop the scenarios in line with the community needs, so they can understand that they require connectivity and then the internet and technological advance and understanding, not only rejecting but probably accepting, or how to explain how they are going to create that scenario. So it's very important. It's a process with cultural diversity, and this has allowed us to identify where gaps are. Because it's not about the urban or the rural sector areas where we have identified those gaps, but also in the analysis we have seen that there's also a gap between the urban centers and the remote sectors. It's not that the urban centers have more connectivity. There were many communities that were so contextualized in the urban center. So we need to understand what are the challenges, what are the gaps, what are the gaps to have access to innovation, technology that have to do with the cities, but it's not merely connectivity. Also, we have gender equality. Some issues are related to migrations, economic issues. So we need to understand clearly that closing the gap means that it's more and more complex. And we need to conceptualize technological development from another point of view. We need to understand that we can create good, solid feedback out of the programs that we implement, and to analyze that feedback and try to understand how these social cooperation and knowledge cooperation can provide us with an understanding, and this will allow us to configure a quality of service in education that is key. With different digital means, and we could be more demanding with what we expect under these sort of scenarios. I believe it is important to do this homework because we are a ministry that under its leadership we have to create and to drive this interest to do research and to improve ourselves. This is the objective of the Ministry of Science and Technology. People that can conceptualize technology. So for us it's key to have these dynamics, to try to understand how we go about it and analyze how we do this, how we integrate this. Because we have seen that many times this initial development that traces back to the 21st century, they have resources available, like at the beginning of the pandemic. This is one of the deepest reflections that we have in the educational systems and the processes that were conducted, and I believe it's a way of approaching another way of know-how and adopt the initiatives that have been developing. So this is the dynamics in which we were involved.
La intervención y ahora sí, espero todas sus preguntas.
Muchas gracias, Marta.
Thanks, Marta. Thank you
Thank
for your excellent presentations and for your presence that allow us to start a discussion and to open this forum for questions and answers. Olga said that private and public cooperation and dialogue is one of the largest challenges, not only in education, but in other arenas. We have the feeling that we have different agendas. How do you feel that the pandemic, or what the pandemic created? Is there a new approach, learnings, approaches? What happens with the dialogue between public and private partnerships?
¿Quieres empezar, Martelena, o empiezo?
¿Quieres empieza, Héctor?
Bueno, quiero mostrarles.
I would like to show you the way
La única manera
we see success, or the only way we see success. We cannot predict it individualistically. Many of the things Marta said, they are true, and wisdom is not the accumulation of information. I believe that it's important to think in terms of digital education, because digital literacy is not an end, but is an approach that will set us free, and they will allow us to fight all sorts of inequalities that we're undergoing in Latin America. So I'm gonna quickly show you a video. It's a case from a student in Colombia that shows us the power of technology of being used for the good. And let me tell you why we have this sort of collaborations during the pandemic.
Tengo 22 años, nací en la ciudad de Santa Marta, Colombia. Soy estudiante de ingeniería académica. Creaciones EVA nace por la necesidad de mi mamá de estar con nosotros. Somos 3 hermanos, entonces ella vio la necesidad de generar ingresos desde la casa. Ella comenzó con muchas manualidades, cerámica, y hace 5 años necesitamos una identidad. Y nos enfatizamos en las manualidades navideñas. Luego de un tiempo yo le dije, mami, hay que darnos a conocer. Y comencé a interesarme en la página de Facebook. Creamos una página, luego pasamos a INTA en 2018. Y lo último creamos WhatsApp. Luego comenzamos a hacer cursos y nos dimos cuenta que la interacción con nuestros clientes, con nuestros clientes potenciales, era lo más importante. Y comenzamos a crear una comunidad. El rol de Facebook, WhatsApp e Instagram en nuestro negocio ha sido el vínculo que es desde nuestros clientes potenciales o clientes con nosotros. Nos ha ayudado a generar ingresos desde casa, a vender a nivel internacional. El programa de webinar Finanzas de Ellas Historia nos ayudó a organizar nuestros ingresos, a saber dividir, como nuestro trabajo en casa, a saber dividir los gastos de la casa con los gastos de la empresa. Nos enseñó también a utilizar otras partes de las redes sociales que no sabíamos, pero lo más importante fue la organización financiera que nos consolidó, brindándonos plantillas, apoyo, seguimiento, que fue lo más importante para poder culminar este curso. Lo primero que me viene a la mente cuando pienso en el programa de ELENA es cambio. porque eso es lo que realmente hace el programa con nosotros, cambiar nuestro pensamiento de finanzas, cambiar nuestro pensamiento en las redes sociales y cambiar nuestro estado de confort a un estado de visión, de apasionarnos por lo que estamos haciendo realmente y de apasionarnos y entregarnos de forma definitiva a nuestro emprendimiento.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen. In the case of Laura, Laura's case wouldn't be possible without two things: openness for the Colombian government to bring this kind of digital education to all the Colombian areas, and to enhance this program. And secondly, without the participation of our local partner, Colnodo, thanks to their dedication and commitment to work with people, they were able to reach a person like Laura and help her to generate value, not only for her, but for her community. Small companies are the engine of Latin America's economy, of our communities, and we can see in small companies a lot that they can offer to societies and to communities that help us assess with metrics and evidence which is the impact and the cause of the relevance of offering this to people and the results after some time. This is what makes us proud and show us that we can do it, that we are suffering an educational and economic emergency, and that we are not going to be able to solve it alone. In these couple of years, we learned to live in a different way than in the last 20 years, and that's why I think this is the way to move forward in the future. I believe that talent that you were talking about building new trust with the private sector and communities, when you talk with as a government sector with an alliance with the private sector, the question that the communities ask is why, what are they going to require from us? It's like they are kind of scared, and we need to show them that, well, the private company is doing something to help the community, and that there's going to be economic development in that area. And for example, a nice project that we have in Borsaco is a union of coffee workers that are working with kids. We need to talk about corporate social responsibility and the different mechanisms and strategies to help communities. And that is one of the first things in which we need to focus when we work with private companies and governments. And something that the pandemic taught us is that we are kind of a little bit more relaxed with the system, with the intention of the processes, because we believe that we are facing a crisis and that it's not very clear how to solve it. So in the Science Ministry, since this was a research exercise, we have a great relationship with private companies. And what we are trying to solve now is how to be able to have our scientists start working on this a little bit more, participating with different private companies. This is like the most complex part. It was to develop this kind of trust scenarios with communities, and that's why it's necessary to do it. We may think, well, what Facebook is doing is positive, but then we listen to some news and then the idea is lost. So we need to think a little bit more about this and to build trust within the communities as regards the public-private connection. It's very positive to listen that there are a lot of steps toward this goal. Olga, I know that you may have some questions from the audience. Yes, thank you so much to both for your presentations and for sharing. I hope that we have learned about the different advantages that we could have. There were great benefits, and we shouldn't lose them because of going back to face-to-face, the face-to-face world. We have to keep the positive aspects of the virtual environment. I hope that offices and education sector learn that we need to take advantage of those benefits. Which are the pedagogic practices that you are using to alphabetize your students? There's another question for both of you. Internet as a human autonomous right. Can you talk a little bit about that concept? Internet as a facilitator for the exercise of other rights that you mentioned. Well, as regards digital alphabetization at schools, this is one of the aspects that we have always paid attention to because of access to technology and access to infrastructure. This is a huge challenge in teacher training, parents and families training. There are some basic needs there to reflect on those matters in order to understand the advantages of technology. Sometimes there's kind of reluctance as regards kids and time spent on screens. So until 2020, there were different research studies that were done as regards kids and time spent on the screen. And after the pandemic, that idea changed. So I think that we need to find like a middle point in order to develop that. And we need to offer this kind of technology to kids and teachers in the ministry. We are working together with the education ministry to develop these hybrid scenarios in which kids can do all the things that they need and have access to the different ways of accessing information. So this is something that is going to take time. It's going to take some time as a society to understand and to do it, but we have taken huge steps as regards access of kids to technology. This was accelerated in the last 10 years, and we believe that the pandemic accelerated this even more. And this is a changing scenario. It's not only digital alphabetization and learning to use the device, but how I learn to program, how I use something within the framework of the Industrial Revolution development. How can I have that knowledge to be able to do it? Now we have to face a different scenario that is kind of more familiar for us.
Bueno, yo me paso a la discusión del derecho al Internet para comentar que en 2016.
Now, let me tell you that in 2016, a UN resolution established that offering human rights on Internet was a basic human right, and that Internet is a right for people all over the world. There are also some national constitutions that mention Internet as a constitutional right, such is the case of Mexico, and that is going to align some public policies that will allow long-term programs to exist, favoring access to Internet and benefiting from Internet. I want to quickly share with the audience the web page that we have in the Soy Digital program, in which you can see the different chapters of the Soy Digital program all over the world. Here, for example, we can go and enter the Colombian chapter, and Marta Elena, that is from Colombia, can see some of the things that we have been doing in Colombia, who are our allies, our advisory committee in the country, and here you can also see some of the resources and how to respectfully interact with people online, how to detect fake news, some piece of advice to detect fake news on WhatsApp, for example, and also how to protect our identity online, which is essential. When we go to an ATM, for example, we can even kind of hide our hands when we are entering the PIN. So we need to have the same kind of precaution when we are online. Sometimes we don't do it, and we offer our personal data everywhere. So you can download presentations, videos, and no matter where you are, you can find a lot of resources. Here we have Impacto.TIC. We have been working with them in the Soy Digital program in Colombia. This is a well-known organization as regards technology, democracy, and science. And this is what I wanted to add, Matías. Thank you, Héctor. Thank you, Marta. It's been a very interesting panel. We could continue talking about this for a long, long time, Olga, but I think that we don't have more time. Thank you, Matías. Thank you, Héctor. Thank you, Marta. Very interesting topic. We need to think about how we are going to, or what we are going to face after the pandemic, maybe like kind of a hybrid context, or what we are going to face. Thank you so much. I want to thank you from Buenos Aires, Argentina. Thank you, Matías, for moderating the panel. Thank you, Marta. I wish you a very nice weekend. I hope that you are safe at home, and maybe sometime we can meet face-to-face. Matías, we have met face-to-face in the past. I want to thank you all. And to the fellows, let me tell you that we're going to continue in half an hour with the last part of the event from Colombia, with 2 panels, and then we are going to have the closing of the school from Buenos Aires.